All right, welcome. Sorry, I'm a minute late, or 2 minutes late, I suppose. Just always trying to get things in order. Let me raise that up a little bit so my top of my head's not getting cut off. I don't have any notes. Happy Friday. Welcome to the stream. Welcome. We're going to go through and see what's going on in the world of the OSR subreddit. And I'm just going to get to it. No time to lose, as they say. No time to lose. As usual, I have not pre-looked at this in any way. I will go ahead and give it a refresh just to check what the latest and greatest is. As usual, let me know if there's any sound or visual oddities. There is something really loud happening outside my window, but usually the noise cancellation, which is so wonderful now in all these interfaces, takes care of it. But if you are hearing sort of a buzzing noise, that's someone doing work outside. Can't be helped. All right, there's an update on risk-averse players in OSC. I'm guessing that is a story. I'll read it. Let's give it a read. Hey, all right. Redick G says, sounds good, looks good. Awesome. Always glad to hear it. Appreciate that. I think we looked at this post the first time around about players who were very risk-averse. These stories are interesting, so I will read it, even though I'm not sure there's not going to be much to say about it. This was posted by My 7 Letters. They wanted to thank everyone who got back on their previous post in offering insightful feedback on handling my brother-in-law and how disruptive he was to the ongoing campaign. Maybe I didn't read this one. Okay, brother-in-law. I guess not. I thought maybe we did this one because I know we looked at something about a risk-averse players, but I don't think it was anyone's brother-in-law. I guess, look, the takeaway, I'm not going to read this whole thing as I'm scanning it. I don't think there's too much to talk about. The takeaway is sometimes you have a player that's problem, and, you take the problem away and things go swimmingly well, which is what seemed to have happened. Hey, Chip. Hey, Elfbait. Seems what happened is there was a group. Brother-in-law was a player who might have been a little bit disruptive. Hey, take them out of the mix, and lo and behold, party has a field day. So, the lesson there is sometimes you can add by, what do they call it? Addition by subtraction. Okay, here we have one called Make Alchemy Weird and Fun. It is a self-promo. Let's see if that's the link to something that we can check out. Name this alchemy book. Where is this? Oh, Itch. Let's see. Is it available? Okay, it's $10 on Itch. Something called Name This Alchemical Book. $10 on Itch. I think this was posted by Working Boy. Suppose if you like it. Okay, we can look at okay, there's a preview. So we can look at the preview of this. Oh, it's a video. Well, that doesn't help us too much. But if you like Rise Up Comus, I think we might have looked at something in Rise Up Comus before. We could check that out. But I'll back away, but I will give them an upvote. I don't know anything about UVG. I guess was that Ultraviolet Grasslands? I need to read that. Any good resources for OSC compatible diseases and poisons? Oh, here we go. Hexed, a little in-browser map making tool. All right, this might be good. Posted by Il Cappuccino. I don't think this has been posted here yet, but it looks like whoever is behind Blog of Holding has created a little JavaScript-based hex map tool called Hexed. Looks like a nice little tool for generating quick little maps by click, in a click-by-click way. So if you're in the mood to make a random wilderness hex map or just like playing with map-making tools, check it out. Looks pretty simple, but it might be just the ticket if you need to make a map for improvised sessions where you want the revealed terrain to be a little more mysterious to you as well. And we have a link. So first let me upvote this. I missed a little window. Okay, now we'll go here. Oh, wow, it is really simple. I will post this into chat. This is called, let's see, where's my chat box? Here we go. Whoops, Hexed. For those who might be watching this or listening to this later, when you might not have the chat at your to avail you. It's at blogofholding.com/hex/. Very simple. Welcome to Hexer. There's some text. A map for random hex crawls. The hex's contents are determined when you click on it. Hexer saves your progress in the browser. All right, well, let's just, I'm just going to pick a middle hex. Plain Wilderness. Okay, so right off the bat, we have a couple of things, right? So we got a random hex. Click on this again to see if it changes. We can also add notes, which I like. And it gives us a latitude and longitude, I guess, in terms of just of the hex map, which makes sense. It doesn't know what part of wider world it is, but it's weird. The whole using latitude, longitude is kind of weird. I guess I maybe would have been better if just put column and row, basically, but you can check. I put it in, tried to put it in about center, and I think I just about nailed it. Where 6 from the top and 9 from the side, I guess, something like that. Oh, okay, we go about that alchemy booklet. It comes from the writer of Sorcery is a Sword Without a Hilt. I don't remember if I saw you review that or someone else. I'm not sure if I revealed it. I do think I looked up something from his blog. Good to know. Maybe I'll have to check it out later. So we can put random hexes in here. We can add our notes about the hex. I'm going to click this again to see if we can cycle through. Oh, and it does. Whoa. Okay, that got a little. We got a little bit of an oddity. Oh, there it is. Okay, just had to click off. There we got some forest. I see. It's a little bit rough around the edges, maybe, but heck. All right, let's go and do a whole little. Whoops. Now we get a little hex flower. What is that? Plain monsters. We got 2 plain monsters. Plain wilderness. Maybe mundane's a better word than plain. I don't know. Plain monster. Sounds so funny. Let's see. Is it truly? I'm just curious about if it's. I'm just going to keep clicking. Whoops. It's a little bit touchy with the mouse where you are in terms of the hex, but you can keep just painting around. It seems like it is taking into account neighboring terrain. Maybe. We did get. I am getting woods next to woods, which is good. I got hills. Oops. Hills and mountains next to the mountains. Is also good. Now we're getting a whole. Ooh, what's that? Oh, we got swamp. I think one thing I probably, it's just myself. I think I prefer. So the iconography here is its own little style, which is fine. Plain wilderness is maybe grasslands. It's what it seems to look like, and it looks like there are several different variations on the tiles. I'm not sure if I love the grasslands. I think I might just prefer ye old original sort of, the kind of classic line art, but I like the hills and the mountain symbols, and the forest ones aren't bad. The monsters, and it looks like layers, and I'll circle back to them in a minute. I could probably give or take. I'm not sure if I like that red. At the moment, there's no options to customize that. Oh, we got a road now. I do. So yeah, it definitely seems to. It definitely seems to pick up on what's around it, which I like. So you get a random road. So we got a random village finally, the first village we've gotten. Next to it, we clicked and it put a road. And then as it was clicking, I was clicking more hexes. Even though the terrain was changing, it kept that road going, which I like. Getting a lot of woods over here. It's fine with me. Oh, we got broken up. Just gonna keep on clicking around for right now. Oh, we got a city, but right now it's hidden. What is that? Hold on, what's that? Plain mystery. I don't know why they call it plain. I guess it means grassland mystery. I'm guessing it's plain. Yeah, that could definitely use some polishing. Oh, so we got a city over there, but no road. Oh, no, there is a road. Oops, I just missed it. Oh, look, and then we got a little village. I don't know why I didn't see the road. Let's see. Radix says you can reinterpret it as you wish. Yes, of course. But the tool looks nice. It does. Hey, look, it's free. It's in the browser, right? There are some limitations. There's no way to. Oh wait, we do have some save and load options down here. Hold on. Let me scroll down. Let me make sure. Okay. So we do have some things we can do. We have we can see the different tiles, and they look good. I might just go. I really like the mountain and hill tiles are very good. Forest is good. Grasslands, I'm okay with it, but maybe something even, I don't know. It just doesn't. I guess I just don't like it as much. And then this one, which I guess is the swamp. Don't love the swamp, but it's just a matter of. It's really it's just it's abstraction, so it's whatever. It's fine. And then we can see that we've got different. We got the monsters. We have looks like a lair. Is that an encounter? I forget. What are they calling that? A mystery. What's that? We got this 8 is a lair. That's good to know. So we got some mysteries, some lairs, some stuff like that. We've got. Oh, and I think we can. Does that mean we can place those? Oh, that's interesting. Does that mean we can? Yeah, I guess we can. Is it a drag? Is it a drag? No, it's not a drag. But maybe I could place a village somewhere like here. Aha, okay. So you can definitely customize it after the fact, which is nice, including putting in roads, which is also nice. So just to test this out, let's see, I could take this road and I'll plunk that there. Plunk, plunk. And what do I need? This one. Plunk. All right. Yeah, this is really nice. I mean, hey, it's free. It's in your browser. You can add notes. You can save it. You can export it. What kind of options do we have for exporting it? To export a map, copy the following text block and then import it on a different device or browser. I see. So you have to kind of plug that whole thing in there. I was hoping it would have some kind of export in an image. Well, maybe that's asking too much, but still, it's a very cool tool. It's called Hexer. blogofholding.com/hex/. That's really neat. I'm not going to save that map, but I guess it'll save it for me. Got an upvote for that. Excellent. Well done. All right. So if you need something quick and kind of random, Hexer might do the trick. Okay, what are the parts of OSR that you don't like? This will be interesting. I don't know if I have any opinions on it, but I'm interested to read what things people don't like or what they find boring and not fun. I'm guessing it's going to be all over the place. I mean, there's lots of all kinds of stuff that I see people could find fault. You might love, I don't know, you might love the lethality and the kind of freeness, openness, and rules light stuff, but you might not like encumbrance or things like that, or racist class if you're playing in a racist class system. Posted by Lore Master 00. It can be anything: parts of the playstyle, philosophical concepts of the scene, personality/content producers, mechanics, community views, publishers, platforms, specific systems, books, design trends, anything in the OSR that just doesn't sit right with you on a personal level. That is really broad. I'll read some of these because I am curious. And let me know in the chat, what do you guys think? What kind of stuff are you not so hot on in the OSR, or that you feel like, I don't know, could be not improved, maybe is the right word, but yeah, the stuff that doesn't sit with you or you don't find fun. It is an interesting question. So for Lore Master 00, personally, I think avoiding combat and the deadly quote-unquote combat as war mentality is just really effing boring. Out of all the aspects of modern games that I don't like and actively reject, combat as sport was never one of them. I like combat. I think it's fun to the point where I think XP for gold is stupid and XP should come from kill counts. What I don't like is the mechanical bloat modern games have that slow the combat down, which made me turn to BX because I'm very into its simplistic/minimalist class design. Playing BX, you don't have to fight the system turn after turn to keep the combat flowing seamlessly without all the different actions, bonus actions, reactions, action surges, and powers and features and whatnot. BX combat just flows. easily. Hell, I unironically think BX fits the heavy combat style of 4E and 5E better than 4E and 5E do. So yeah, I'm not really into that part of OSR mentality. What about you guys? What parts of the OSR you just flat out hate? Well, I can say this. I do not hate combat as war. I really dig combat as war, and I'm not a huge fan of combat as sport. That I guess I would be sort of diametrically opposite to Lore Master 00. I find that kind of boring after a while. And I think the thing is, well, I guess there's, so combat as sport in that you want to kind of kill everything and that's the fun. That's what's boring. I think coming up with interesting ways if you're into combat, or I would say if you get into combat, is fun. And coming up with that novel strategy is great. But usually in terms of the novel strategies, what makes them good to me, what makes them fun to me, is how can I short circuit this encounter? Oh my gosh, these goblins, it's going to take forever for us to do this, and or our chances of success are really low. What can we do to up our odds and get this over in a round or two, or cause them to run away or flee? Those are the things that I find fun. In combat as sport, you really wouldn't want to do that, because part of the sport is creatively dispatching all those goblins. But me, it's about, can we bring a rock slide down and kill them all in one round, or block them, or could we talk, or could we do other things? Those are the things that I end up fun. Or could we sneak, or could we try to kill their leader and hope that they'll flee because the leader is the glue holding them together. So interesting that they don't like that. I do agree. I think BX does fit very well, and you can add a few things to it if you want to. I think Lamentations of the Flame Princess added a few things. I know I've house ruled some things in there if you want to add in a couple of maneuvers, things like that to do. I think BX is fine. And for if you do want to run combat, though, it's just not my bag necessarily. Elfmate says, I personally find the OSR to be far more weird and gonzo than the old school stuff it purports to emulate. Yes, I am definitely not on the weird and gonzo edge of the OSR scene. I'm sure if you've been in any of my videos, you probably would have picked up on that by now. But yeah, the OSR, I mean, that's that Renaissance part of it, right? Because it's not just let's play like we did in 1982. It's taking all this stuff and looking at it in a new way, and taking it and making it our own, and taking off in directions we didn't that they didn't even anticipate back then, or didn't know about, or didn't think about, whatever, right? That's part of it. It's not just like in the original Renaissance. It's not just let's just replicate what the Greeks and Romans were doing. It's let's take that using all of our history and where we are in our context, and you create something new, pulling out of this information that had been lost, this data, right? This whatever it happens to be. So in that case, yes, OSR as it exists now is way more gonzo and weird than most games I think were back then. Certainly the games I was playing. But it may be too that I started playing early. And I was playing probably before I'd read much Conan, maybe Conan comics and things like that. But certainly if there was a lot of really weird and gonzo fiction and things that would have been cultural resources in the game for me, I didn't really have them. We were reading reading some of the Lord of the Rings, or reading the sword, the Sword in the Stone, or the Black Cauldron, or what were those things, like the Book of Three and things like that, which were maybe Elric on the edge. But even Elric's, it's not, in some ways it feels very different than some of the more standard fantasy things, but it certainly doesn't, to me, doesn't feel like as crazy, gonzo as a lot of stuff you see here. So definitely a different world. But I like that the community supports both. So there's plenty of room out there for folks who like it maybe more, where you get into, we were calling it old school as opposed to OSR, or old, what was it? I don't know, classic, whatever. Or if you like it, if you love to go, gonzo, then that's fine too, which is kind of what's great about the scene, I think. Reddick says, yeah, I planned my first hex crawl and I've chosen DCC as a system. I'm a bit afraid of its gonzo side. Yeah, I mean, well, you got to look at that, right? When you're choosing your system, I mean, it's a really good, you didn't pose this as a question, but it's a really good question in terms of or thing to look at maybe when you're picking your systems is, what kind of game am I getting out of the system? Am I going to be fighting the system to get the game that I want? So just make sure that DCC, the kind of games that DCC ends up supporting, is the kind of game that you want, though it can be hard sometimes, because sometimes you might love 8 things that say DCC does, just an example, but then there are these 2 things that you don't like, but maybe those 2 things are really blended into everything else, So they could be hard to excise, or they could be easy to cut out. It really depends on your things. Um, I mean, I like DCC as a system. I really like some of the stuff, but I haven't really played it. I think I played a little bit of a funnel. I don't even think I made it through a full funnel. Just stuff, falling apart when you're playing by post kind of thing. Elfbait says, it seems that so many people in the OSR firmly believe that is how things were. I guess it's that I think there's a cultural divide between the people who played back in the day, and again, I'm not that old. I'm not even a teenager when I first was getting a hold of D&D books. But you have people who played back then, and then you have people who picked it up now. And of course, it's always going to be your miles may vary, because someone's going to poke out of the woodwork and say, no, I played for 40 years and we were doing crazy, weird stuff back in the day. It's like, okay, I can only talk from my experience and the people I played with. I never ran into any groups that were doing any gonzo stuff to the levels of things you see now. It is interesting how people have kind of backfilled. Oh, this is kind of what OSR is. Therefore, this is kind of what the old school stuff was doing. I think for the most part, when you read the reports of the early groups, those great, mail in or mail out newsletters that you would see from these groups operating in the mid to late 70s and things like that, their games were pretty standard. It seemed to me, at least from my point of view, and they weren't terribly gonzo. But hey, play what you like. But yeah, there's an interesting kind of push-pull of the people who are looking at the systems. I think you get a lot of this into kind of that, what are the rules saying, and maybe what do they mean, or what do people take it to mean? So you get people who played back in the day. Some of them played with Gary, played with, in Blackmore, and they're saying, regardless of what was written on the page, this is how we actually did it. And the people saying, well, who cares what you actually did? That's just your experience, man. But here's what the rules say, and this is what we're going off of. So we get a lot of interesting things. Sometimes it leads to just round and round circling each other, where people aren't listening and they're just talking past each other. But I think there is some interesting things in these comparing kind of what were the actual games like, what did people play, and then how have people taken those stuff and reinterpreted it now. Elfbait says, I know the Appendix N likes to list a lot of oddball stuff that may have influenced the creators, but it certainly never seemed to come out in print. Yeah, there's a lot of things, right? And I think that Appendix N can be tricky, or I guess maybe the rules can be tricky, because I think you can read the materials and you'll see all the Tolkienian stuff, and I think you can come to the conclusion that Tolkien was a huge influence, and then Sword and Sorcery much less so, just because, oh, look, they have they've Ents, and they've got Balrogs, and they've got Hobbits, and they've got, whatever sort of, I guess, Tolkienian dwarves, and the elves are fairly Tolkienian or Tolkien inspired. So look at all that stuff. Look, this is super Lord of the Rings. But I think that really the game is more, not that Lord of the Rings has no influence, of course not, but Sword and Sorcery I think is actually the bigger influence when you look at reading the rules and kind of seeing how it wants you to play versus playing a high fantasy, we're out to stop a Sauron type force. And I think when you look at the early campaigns, that's not what they were about. These weren't guys who were out trying to take down the great evil. They were more, happy-go-lucky is the right word, but they were more adventurers, which is what you get from Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and a lot of those other stories. And then, of course, when you look at things like deities and demigods and some of those other books and even earlier god books, I forget what it was called, but everything they put everything in the kitchen sink. Barsoom, Conan, Elric, just put it all into a blender, so to speak. It also says people's individual groups may have varied, but the published materials never seemed all that odd. Yeah, I think that. I think so. I'm sure to some people from the outside who weren't into fantasy fiction, it probably seemed pretty odd. But inside fantasy, yes, I would agree. It doesn't seem to be very, very odd. But hey, that's the great thing about the Renaissance thing. People can pick it up, reinterpret it. Elfbait also saying Sword and Sorcery was a bigger influence, though Sword and Sorcery does tend to be pretty subdued with its heroes, often pretty gritty and grounded. Yeah, that's the thing with Sword and Sorcery. It's very similar to, say, Cthulhu. The heroes, the protagonists, are very grounded in reality, and they're subjected to just crazy, weird stuff. But they don't really embrace the crazy, weird stuff. More or less, they're either, can they kill it? Can they run away from it? Are basically the two things, right? How many Conan stories end up with Conan by hook or by crook, not usually by his choice, ends up subjected to or in the presence of something weird and terrifying, usually both. And either there's some trick to killing it or sending it back to wherever it came from, banishing it, whatever, that he manages to do, or he's running for his life. And the screams of the people who were slower than him and couldn't make it out right are just behind him, kind of thing. And the same thing, Far from the Gray Mouser, a lot of their stories when they're not dealing with, or even when they're dealing with just the Thieves Guild stuff, usually there's something weird and strange, and same kind of thing. Either they manage to banish it or kill it somehow, or they manage to escape. But they're not like in the cantina with all the weird, strange things, buying them drinks and hanging out. These things are odd and they're weird and they're coming out of the woodwork, and either you got to kill it or you got to run away and hopefully you live and it doesn't kill you or blow out your mind or do something, weird. Vance says, OD&D magic refers to as Vancian, but doesn't capture any of the weirdness or risk in the Dying Earth books. Hence the DCC efforts and randomizing magic. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Vancian in the D&D sense is just the memorization, that memorization aspect. I have a feeling. Now, look, they were the first, right? They're doing it first. So, you have to put yourself in their shoes when they're trying to put some kind of structure onto these spells. And I think it's easier now when I think people are more willing to hand wave stuff than they were back then. Coming from a wargaming background where you really are you want to measure stuff off, you want to give things really defined qualities and properties, because that's your background. When you're playing a war game, all this stuff has very defined dimensions and things like that. Now I think you can get more loosey-goosey and people are more comfortable with having stuff that doesn't necessarily relate to making a really defined picture. Even if the language they used wasn't super precise as we might like, or super detailed, I think they had in their mind the ideas of what if this was existing kind of in a war game kind of thing, or if we were playing this out, like what does that really look like? And Vancian magic in all of its flavors that you might read about in the Dying Earth series probably doesn't really fit in that mold when they're trying to come up with rules and things. And plus, they're not in a short story. You don't have to talk about you only have to talk about the kind of effects that the readers can see and what affects the story. Other things you can just hand wave away and whatever, doesn't deal with. But they're trying to figure out how do these powers and abilities work in terms of at different levels, and where are we going to place this spell, and how does it fit in. They have a lot of things that Vance didn't have to worry about when he was just riffing this stuff. And Radix says, hey, that's one part of the DCC that he likes, the magic system. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I don't like about the magic system, or not I don't like, is I just wish they had some way of not standardizing, but having to make a tables, was it misfire tables, whatever, for each spell is a bit of a bore. And I wish they'd had a way to either do it by school or some other way of maybe make it a pivot table or something, or what do they call a spark table? Something that would just be a little bit easier where if I was creating spells or I was encouraging my players to create spells, that there isn't a lot of extra legwork to do with those tables. Because I would love to get into more, making my own spells, and maybe my players would make up spells. But then that part kind of is a little bit daunting to me of like, okay, for each one of these, I got to make my own table. And I kind of go, well, is it worth it? Ooh, I don't know. So I kind of wish there was obviously I'm sure you can house rule something else, and probably people have, but I do find that a little bit of extra crunch that maybe to me isn't worth it exactly. I know people love the misfires, but maybe there's a way to make them a little bit more generic, a little less spell specific, so we can get that same flavor, maybe 90% of the flavor, but with 60% of the work, 50% of the work. Example, old school fireball is a mini lesson in the physics of fire. Pretty much. I mean, they're trying. They are trying, because I think they're imagining what fireball would actually look like, as opposed to it's just magic, it fills squares, nobody cares, which is kind of how I think it is now, more or less. It says the dark and dangerous magic system from Low Fantasy Gaming is a good alternative to DCC's magic danger system. I ran across Low Fantasy Gaming ages ago, but I think I only kind of flipped through it. I think I need to pull that out again, or go get one and check it out, because it seems interesting. Terrence says, Spark Table? That's where I make my Molotov cocktails. Ba-dum-bum-ch. I think it's called a Spark Table. Somebody pioneered it in terms of role-playing games, but it's basically when you have a table of results, and each result actually has a couple of options. So you might say, I don't know, in a table of if you're rolling how tall or what does my character look like, maybe you'll roll 3 times on the table and you'll have a result, might be, short or thick. And so you would pick one. Okay. Slender or something else, right? So you end up having a table of multiple columns, and just because of these essentially binary choices in each column, you can get a lot more results with fewer dice. Now, granted, you're not getting all your results from the dice because you're picking, so you are using some of your judgment or putting your own point of view in there, whatever. But you can do a lot. I think it's called the Spark Table. Somebody correct me if they know, but it's an interesting way of doing things, and it just lets you get a lot more results, giving you a little bit of choice, which is nice, but you're still random. So you're still locked into random results, but a little bit of choice in there to kind of guide it in a way. Okay, let's see what some of these folks in this thread have been saying. Eher444444 says, people forgetting / glossing over there's no wrong way to have fun with an old school game. The assumption sometimes that the OSR is a specifically defined thing rather than an umbrella term that encompasses many games and playstyles. Popular RPG creators and personalities are fun and often interesting, but aren't the final word on what the OSR is or should be for you and your table. Yep, that's very true. I don't know that I've seen any. Maybe it's just the people that channels I've been on. I haven't seen people evangelizing particular styles of OSR, though I guess we do in terms of just what we decide to talk about, and not like I talk a lot about X crawls and the more kind of gritty style. So I guess I do evangelize for it implicitly, though I don't explicitly try to tell anybody that there's bad, wrong, fun. Oh, wait a minute. Flix or Flivix. Sorry, I got that wrong. Is that a V? Flivix says Spark Table is correct. Great. Good to know that I got one right. Brian Smith. Hey, Brian Smith says, found me recently. Big ups, and hey, Elfbait, I recognize you from the Nerd Archie chats. Well, look at that. People are getting around. Well, hey, Brian Smith, thanks for finding me. Hope you're enjoying it. Okay, what else we got here? Logan 9 says, honestly, that 90% of the quote-unquote content in some OSR games is a D6 or D66 or D100 table with some wacky nonsense that, don't get me wrong, is well written, but I would never use. Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells, for example, was touted as the only space fantasy book you will ever need. And by its page count, I bought in. But in reality, all those wondrous tables are fun to read and inspiring, but largely useless as actual content, in my opinion. Still love the book. Of course, works like Worlds and Stars Without Number largely make up for the games that do this. But the funny thing is, Logan 9, is that Worlds Without Number, we went through a lot of their, I did 9 parts, I think, going through their campaign creation tools, and it is 90% tables. So maybe it's just, I think it's more, not so much that they're using tables, but the wacky nonsense, which is, look, that's your miles may vary. One person's wacky nonsense is someone other's gonzo gold. And I know from looking at OSR Reddit and OSR Discords, people love them some tables. So I feel for you, and I definitely have gotten the sense sometimes you read something, you're like, wow, this is great, but I would never use it. But I think that when Logan 9 says, hey, they're inspiring, to me, that's usually what I'm looking for anyway. That's the biggest thing, is can I find material that inspires me, that gets my brain onto things I'm going to use, even if I'm not going to use that specific thing. That's probably, I don't know, 8/10 of what I'm looking for. I mean, sure, it is nice to have stuff that if I'm in a bind in an actual session, and I know the players have about 30 seconds of conversing within them amongst themselves before they're going to turn to me and expect something. If I can have a table I can roll and give me something actionable right in that moment, that's great. But that for me isn't so much a problem, or I'm more comfortable in that role of, okay, I can come up with something. It's more that maybe when I have a little bit more time, or even in that moment, I really just need that spark of inspiration. So the fact that it is inspiring, even if I'm not going to use it as written in whatever table, is more or less good for me. Yep, Van Say says, OSR definitely loves tables. Well, hey, Brian, hey, you found me. Yeah, Hex Crawl. So Brian said, I guess I'll just pull it up, says, Found me while lurking around for more info on how hex crawls actually work. Well, yeah, thanks. I think that probably my hex crawl videos are, to the extent that my videos have any fame at all, and it is very little, the hex crawl videos are probably the ones that people have found me on the most. So glad you found me. I need to get back to doing some hex crawl stuff. I'll have some hex crawl stuff soon. Terrence says, I'm all wacky nonsense followed by gloomy endings. Yep. Lots of, look, the thing is with the wacky stuff is that you are more likely to get inspired by something wacky because it's outside your, I feel like that you get outside your box, and that's when you're going to get that stroke of genius, one might hope. Sometimes when you're reading stuff that might be right in your wheelhouse, it's not helping you out of your rut. But there is that cost of it's not as immediately usable. And I will say that it can be hard to figure out which supplements, which resources are going to give you the stuff that is most usable to you if that's what you're looking for. It can be very hit and miss. And it is easy, I think, as an author, as a content creator, to fire out a bunch of nonsense. And it almost is a good cover because it's expected that stuff's going to be nonsensical and sort of, it's gonzo, so that doesn't matter. And you don't have to worry. I feel like you can kind of cover yourself for, maybe this isn't as well meshed together as I would like, but it's gonzo. So, it kind of becomes a little bit, I think can be used as a little bit of a, hey, don't worry about the fact that this stuff doesn't make sense or doesn't fit together. It's gonzo. And that part doesn't necessarily work so much for me. Oh, Null Terminated. Hey, Null Terminated says, saw someone recommend the channel in one of the recent How to Hex Crawl posts on OSR. Ooh, well, that's great. Hey, feel free to recommend me wherever you go. Awesome. Maybe we'll see the post. I can find the post, I can find the recommendation, and I can upvote it. That's awesome. Cool. It's always nice that every once in a blue moon, I'll go in somewhere. Usually, I'll do these things where I'll look and I'll say, like, where's somewhere appropriate where I can do a little self-promotion? Because as a content creator, it's just, that's part of the game is you gotta self-promote. And then and I'll throw my self-promotion there and I'll get the, like, oh, I already found you, and you're great or you're awful, but I did find you. And I'm like, always like, oh, wow, that's great. They found me. Brian Smith says, just something that feels wrong about buying someone's random ideas that don't feel like they're even edited. Yeah, someone put that also on the thing about this, that the editing. Yeah, there it is. Late term aborter. Ugh, what a awful name. Come on, man. I hate the lack of editing. Yeah, I think there is something, it's a little bit punk. It's a little bit, the grassroots. And so one of the things that falls by the wayside is having that editor, or having, I don't say a good editor, professional, or multiple editors. Look, I read stuff on the channel. If you're new in here, you might not have seen my rulebook read-alongs and things that I do, and whether sometimes they're by self-publishers or small groups or large publishers, and I will often find numerous typos and things, even amongst folk that have the means to, get things right. Sometimes they just don't get right. But the smaller you are, and certainly when you're doing your own stuff, something I grapple with as I'm working on my own stuff is that, hey, I can't afford an editor, but you recognize that there's only so much you can catch yourself, just because you just become kind of blind. You get sort of blind to your own foibles and things. You almost have to put it away for a week and then come back and read it, and your eyes kind of freshen, and then suddenly you'll see stuff, you'll pick stuff off and go, oh gosh, what was I going to do with that? A lot of Vengers subtweeting here. Oof. All right. Andy Duvall says, editors are expensive. Yeah, this is definitely true. You're looking at 5 to 10 cents a word. 12-page design is like 4,000 words easily. Yes, it is expensive. And I kind of want to, at some point, I'll put together a coming up business page, because I do want to offer, because I have a writing background. I was an English major. I have writing and layout background, as well as being into RPGs, and I want to help people, but it's one of those things too, where I've struggled with. Again, it's something I've thought about, is I want to offer my services. If anybody watches my streams, I will, and I can't help myself. And I know I know at least one person got a little bit upset because they were a small person, and I was kind of calling them out in my stream a little bit with, like, okay, this is, here's a typo, or this doesn't make sense, or this is laid out kind of wonkily. And I just can't help it. I mean, that's the one thing when you're streaming, as I am doing now, you're going to get my, I'm not pre-prepping this stuff. I'm not going in here when I read the PDFs and things that either I get or people send me. I'm just reading them. So if I come across something that either doesn't make sense or the words don't flow, or I'm looking on the map and can't find something, I can't find something. Or if I find a typo, I'm like, okay, there's a typo. But it's that kind of that weird thing of the people who can afford it probably maybe don't need somebody, or they have somebody already, and the people who need it the most can't afford somebody to do it. So it's a weird thing. But I want to help people, but I got to figure out how I can plan that out. Ryan says, even just having a second set of eyes looking at your ideas and saying these suck or these are interesting is super valuable. Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that helps too is giving it into hands of people who are not RPG players already, because you bring in a lot of your preconceptions. I think I guess I should say, I think it's good to have both. I think it's giving it on one hand to people like me or like you or like your friends, whoever, who are RPG aficionados, who know RPG terminology, knows how things do, to look at it that way. And I think it's also helpful to get to people who don't have any RPG experience, because you never know when this might be the first RPG that somebody's picking up, or they just haven't read tons of them. So they don't know all these things that you take for granted that they know. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of room to help out a lot of folk. But the point is, how do you do it in a way that it's fair to your time, but also taking into consideration the fact that a lot of these folks are doing it in their spare time and they don't have any money. They don't have money to cover their own stuff, let alone paying somebody else. I'm a grammar grognard. I'm not even really. I just want the things to flow, And when I think here's something you can do. I think as a trick that might simulate when you get somebody like me who's reading it online. We're really reading it aloud. Read it aloud. Because sometimes I think you could read it in a text, and even if I'm just reading it in my head, I'll fill in stuff, and okay, there's a little gap here. And sometimes I'll do that, there's a the missing or something, and I might just absentmindedly just throw it in there. But when you have to read it out loud, you really, I think, will come across stuff where either the words just start to tumble, or you realize that it just doesn't flow well, that you might not get. Now, for a lot of people, it doesn't matter, but when you get people like me who may be reading it online, it matters. It matters. All right, we're 40 minutes into this, and I feel like we've done nothing. Well, not nothing, but Last week, I felt like we found multiple awesome things to share, and this week, I don't. Okay, here's something. All right, BX, right up my alley. Unique deal of races. It says variant rules, but I don't actually see a rule. Oh, it's a question. Come on, people. I'm going to upvote this, but this is just my personal thing. It's not a variant rule if you're asking a question. If you're going to use the flares, put the right flare. That is a question. I was hoping you'd have a variant rule. Instead, you're actually looking for variant rules. The Banshee from the pages of the Codex Monstrum, a bestiary from a world beyond our own. Shall we check this out? Dare we? What is it? Oh, it's just a picture. It's a nice picture, but it's just a picture. I like the style, though. Okay, so we go to these house rules. OD&D class homebrew and alterations. Oh, wait a minute. I got a question in the chat. I'm writing up rule tables for a homebrew hex crawl, but I find myself creating more tables as I flesh out others. Is that just the nature of the beast? Yep, pretty much. And you'll settle into a flow of how many tables you want and how you want them to interact together. There was I think it's down now. It's been down for a while. I think it's probably not coming back up, but there was this, I think it was called Abulafia, and it had all these, or that was the URL. I think the name of it was something different, but it was something that if you can use, or maybe, what was that? There's that program that does it too, where you can essentially automate your tables and subtables so that you're not rolling endless amounts of dice, and they could just give you the results out. And Abulafia had all these tables. They had tables for everything. But the great thing is you would go to a table, let's say for a magic sword, and behind the scenes, it's rolling on tables for what gems and what metals and what shape of the sword and all these other things. But you just got all the swords. But you could drill down and see, oh, here's all these tables they rolled on. So people could keep adding in all these tables. I mean, it was amazing. For your home game, if you can't I don't know Chartopia. I know Chartopia is something else. It was that there's that I'll have to find it. It was that what's that one thing it's like a Java program or something and it has just tables upon tables that you can do and you can I got to remember it. But no, Chartopia is not it. But for your personal use, if you don't have some kind of way of programming all these tables so you can automate it for yourself, if you're a web programmer or just a regular programmer, you could probably do something in, you could make your own browser-based thing with JavaScript or use Python or anything you want. But if you're using just tables and you're going to roll on them, what you'll do is you'll end up finding this rhythm of what you like. Okay, I like these tables. And you'll probably get to a point where you've done one table too many and it looks really great on paper, but then you get in your session and you start to roll on all these tables and you'll go, yeah, I need to break this up, or I need to, merge it back together. And you can always add more. You can always go with, say, a D100 table that has a boatload of options instead of several, 1D6 tables, something like that. I'm not doing all the calculating how many options are in D6s, multiple D6 tables versus one D100 table, but you can, you'll end up finding that balance that works for you, or maybe moving some of those tables just to like every once in a while and just riffing when you don't need them, that kind of thing. But yeah, it is. I think it's a little bit of the nature of the beast. You get into doing tables and kind of like other elements of world building, you can go down rabbit holes of table building. Brian Smith, that sounds neat. I've been setting up tables to use the different die types so I can drop a handful at once and have something created. Yeah, that's great. And you can also look at those. If Brian Smith, if you haven't seen it, there's also this die drop concept where you can look at where the dice fall on a surface and where they are in relation to each other. Can also be something you can kind of build results out of. And I've seen them used for things like dungeon layouts and building out hex maps. You could probably think of some other versions if you wanted to, some different ways to deal with that if you're dropping a bunch of dice. Andy Duvall says, Fantasy Grounds VTT has a really powerful table feature that lets you make that kind of thing with subtasks. Oh, cool. I am very VTT ignorant. I mean, I know the names. I've watched every once in a while. I'll throw on a stream, like a live stream for a couple minutes just to see what's what. And they'll have one VTT or another, but I have actually not used them. My home game, which we missed this week because there's things happening in life, is just Discord, Theater of the Mind, and Dice Maiden for dice rolling. Oh, Brian Smith, he already knows about dice dropping. Cool. So should we look at OD&D class homebrew and alterations? I pray this is actual content. Yeah, we have content. All right. Posted by Smarmer_class. Hey, all. I've been thinking lately about my OD&D White Box FMAG rule set. I've got some ideas regarding alterations and additions to the class roster. Feel free to critique as I am looking for feedback. Hopefully these aren't too atrocious. LOL. Firstly, the changes to existing classes. All right, so let's see what he's got here. Scroll down a bit. Okay, fighter. These are alterations. Replace the fighter's combat fury ability with cleave. I don't know FMAG white box. What is that? Metal. I don't know. I can never remember what the FMAG stands for. I don't know what combat fury ability is, but he's replacing it with cleave. All extraneous damage done to a target will transfer to adjacent enemies within reason. Well, I mean, if they're adjacent, are they? I guess I would say, are they adjacent to the fighter or adjacent to the other enemy? I mean, either one of those actually could be fairly cool. You could have some kind of, I think of like Lancers from Final Fantasy Tactics that they kind of would zip along, or they would drop from great heights. But you could have one that goes essentially all around the fighter, right? So cleave adjacent to the fighter, so he's got a bunch of enemies around him. He can thwack amongst them until he runs out of damage. But another one could be interesting is if you could charge forward and actually just plow over the first guy, and then exchange damage goes to any enemy adjacent to them, which means they could kind of keep pushing forward as long as they're killing folk. Actually, I kind of like that. That kind of a charge thing actually sounds really cool to me. I might have to just see. Look at that, inspired already. I might have to remember that for myself. Fantasy medieval adventure game. Thank you. I keep thinking of like Full Metal. I think that's what it is. I keep wanting to say Full Metal or something or other. Fantasy medieval adventure game. Brian Smith says, I think 4E has cleave. It was adjacent to the target, I believe. 4E had cleave. 3rd edition had cleave. Maybe even 2nd edition had cleave. I don't know. Maybe even Beckme had cleave. But yeah, but I believe they were adjacent to the fighter. So if you had two enemies that were in a line, you couldn't thwack one down and thwack the one behind him, but you could thwack the one next to you. So the fighter, you'd want to get in amongst all the enemies and just cleave around you. I think, but again, I could be misremembering, but I think that's how it worked. It's a small matter either way, but I kind of like the idea that you could do that, but keep pushing your momentum forward. I may have to steal that in some way. Well, steal it. They didn't even mention it. It's just, I may have to use that myself. Now we have one more. We have add a will pool equal to the fighter's level. The player can expend one or more points to add to a roll where their strength of will may allow them to overcome an obstacle. The pool replenishes after you boast of your exploits to a non-party NPC. The pool replenishes after you boast of your exploits. Oh, I don't mind that. So you're not going to get that many. I mean, at most, you're going to be getting, I guess, depending on how many levels you want to throw in there. If you're going full, like, to immortal, then I guess you could have 36 or something like that at the end of the day. But if it's a game like mine, you're probably going to end up with 10 or 11, 12, and that's if you make it to the very end. So you're only going to have a couple. That's not super strong. I like the replenishing after you boast your exploits to a non-party NPC. I think that's a nice feature. It incentivizes some social actions by the fighter, and it also means that you could get a bunch of it in a day if you happen to find people you can boast to. Can you boast to the enemy? I would say you have to be able to speak their language, but I would say yes. I would absolutely allow you to yell in some enemy's face, though maybe I'd give you some kind of consequence if you boast, because clearly if you're boasting about, killing their kinsman or something as a way of getting your will pool back, I might call it something different than will pool, but I do like the idea that you have this kind of thing you can go from, and it might even be a little bit, I guess, first level you can just add one, and I would say you could add it to damage too if you wanted to. Make it anything. I wouldn't even have this caveat of where there's strength of will. Just you're rolling dice for something, you can add this pool to it. Why not? You don't get that many. I would just say let them have it. Cleric. Oh wait, I forgot one more. So we also have weapons specialization. For two-handed weapons, you have advantage on damage rolls. When dual wielding, add +1 to hit. You may shatter your shield to negate a single attack. Okay, I don't know why you would call that weapon specialization for the shields, but sure. It's really just when, I wouldn't even call weapon specialization, but yeah, two-handed weapons, advantage on damage rolls is pretty good. When dual wielding, +1 is nice. Maybe I'd even say +2. Just give it a little bit of a better swing. Maybe +1 is fine. I mean, really, you could just factor it into that to hit. Oh, I guess it's when you're dual wielding. Yeah, +1's probably good for dual wielding, but I don't know, maybe +2. I don't know. Because +2, what's the advantage on a damage roll? If you're using, say, D6 damage rolls, how much does that play in? I guess I could go to any dice and sort it out. But yeah, maybe +2, but +1 or +2, either one's pretty good. Now we get to the cleric. The player may sacrifice 100 gold pieces or an equivalent item per level of a spell slot in order to regain it without the need for a full night's rest. That's not bad. 100 gold pieces per level of spell slot. I'd make that a bigger number, I think. Because at low levels, I mean, any level, you can guess things that are that fairly easily. And that would mean that, I don't know, a 9th or whatever the highest level cleric spells, 900 gold pieces. It seems like when you get to that level where you have it, that's chump change for you. You could carry around some gems that are easily worth 900 gold pieces. Or it's per level. Yeah, 9 times 100. So 900 for a 9th level cleric or something is a pittance. So I probably would want to scale that up more. And I would also want to say, well, how long does it take? Maybe one turn. There's a ritual that takes place, maybe one turn per level as well. So you could do a first level spell, spend 10 minutes. 6th level spell, you're going to be doing an hour for this ritual in which you're making this sacrifice. So I would add that extra cost. And then secondly, 10% multiplied by level, chance to commune with one's deity. Success does not necessarily grant the supplicant's request. Simply that God is made aware of the cleric's presence. Try not to piss off your God. Now I think that 10% is too high. I don't want a 9th level cleric to have a 90% chance of communing with their deity. Maybe I would say 1% or 2%. So you end up with something in the nature of 10% to 20% chance And I would also want to make it a hidden roll, I think, probably. So, yeah, and maybe there'd be a chance you get somebody else. You dial the wrong number. Instead of getting the God of Peace, you get the God of War. I don't know. You could have some fun with that. Brian Smith says, is boast an actual mechanic? Seems really cool. Nope. I think it's just, you get into a social spot and you start bragging about your exploits. A fun skill that fighters could use charisma for. Yeah, I wouldn't even force a die roll. If they were just boasting, bragging, I wouldn't force a die roll unless it was going to be something like you're going to roll a new reaction. And some people might take better to the boasting and some people are going to dislike it. That might be where I might come in. But I don't think for the boast, I would say now roll charisma. There's no read. The only, like I said, if I was going to roll something, it might be as a consequence of their boasting. Maybe depending on if they're being really braggadocious or however they're doing it, I might say, okay, these people might react differently to you now, and I'll roll for that. And of course, their charisma might play into that reaction roll. For magic user, we get spell strain. The player may sacrifice hit points in order to improve spell rolls / effects. To clarify, I have magic users roll to cast spells 1d20 plus level plus int versus DC 10 plus spell level, 1-to-1 basis for hit point exchange. Yeah, I do like rolling to cast spells, especially if you're gonna get rid of or reduce spell slots somehow. Then I think rolling to cast spells is a fair way to balance it. What I don't like in this particular instance is leveraging intelligence. One of the things I like about games like BX is that your attributes have a pretty fixed effect on your character. They're not scaling with you. Okay, you have +1 to your strength. Great, and you're going to have that +1 the whole game, but it's not scaling and scaling and scaling. So I don't like anything that's going to take fighters and then penalize them if they don't have a plus whatever in strength over and over again. So a fighter, yeah, you get your plus whatever, but then your class skills take over. And I would not want a fighter class that started adding that strength back in because that's just multiplying the importance of strength. And same thing for a magic user. I don't want to multiply the importance of intelligence. Whatever intelligence you have, which helps you with your languages learned, is really more of a learning or knowledge or recall, whatever. And then after that, it's all your class stuff. So I would probably say 1d20 plus level versus DC 9 plus the spell level, so that you get essentially 10 versus 10 at first level kind of thing. But that's just me. And then we have cantrips. A magic user can create minor inconsequential effects based upon currently memorized spells. For example, if a character memorized the spell light, they may create a small glowing orb at the end of a fingertip in order to read in the dark. Does not expend a spell slot. Full disclosure, this came from someone else's house rules, and for the life of me, I can't remember from where. If you're aware, please drop it in the comments below. That's a really cool. I do like that cantrip idea based on memorized spells. You probably want to work out some ideas for at least your very common spells, because you have things like light. Okay, that's easy, right? Okay, so you're making a big light, so your cantrip is making a small light. But what about something like comprehend languages? What does the cantrip of comprehend languages look like? I'm not sure. You get a word, you get maybe just a feeling, you get kind of an empathy kind of thing. I don't know. And then do those cantrips then step on the toes of other spells? Could you just keep rolling your cantrip for comprehend languages instead of doing something else? So I need to sort that out. But it's a really great concept. I'll have to remember this one as well. That concept anyway. Now we get to the thief. Rename the thievery skill to this would be rolled when the character is attempting to perform a feat of nigh supernatural roguery. For example, hiding in a fairly well-lit room or fleeing without leaving tracks. This is so that any character within reason can attempt to roll, to pick a lock, sneak, etc., utilizing the same mechanic as opposed to creating a stealth class with incongruous rules. I don't think I have an issue with that. Chip says, my favorite cantrip is nap. Yeah. Exactly. What would nap from sleep look like, Chip? What would one get out of a nap cantrip? I want to know. Okay, now we get a couple of fully home brewed classes. The Dervish, which they originally intended to replace the Thief, but I guess they're no longer doing that. Weapon and armor restrictions. Any weapon besides two-handed is allowed. They may only wear leather armor. Hit die as magic user to hit and saving throw as thief. +2 versus traps if replacing thief, or +2 versus hazards, i.e. falling bricks, loose construction, etc. Prime requisite is dexterity. Cheap shot. Roll using a pool of d6s equal to your maximum hit dice. What does that mean? Your maximum hit dice, or would just be really your level? Not sure what that means. If the combined total of your dice would act as a successful to hit roll, you may make that extra attack. For example, if you had 5 hit dice, you could, I see, so it's when you gain hit dice, you could expend all 5 at once to attempt one attack. Or split them into several rolls. But once they are spent, they are gone for the rest of the encounter. I don't know about that one. It seems a little bit clunky. Might want to... Oh, it's a single target sleep spell. That's a good idea. That might be too strong for a cantrip, though, just because of how... I think that fails the inconsequential. But you know what I might do? Here's what I might do. I would say, okay, you can't put a single target to sleep, but you could cast that on someone who's already asleep, and then they won't wake up unless you hit them or do something that would wake you out of a sleep spell. That's what I might do for that one. I feel like just putting somebody to a single target sleep spell is still kind of strong for a cantrip that's supposed to be kind of inconsequential. But I think I could see some very interesting usages if you're sneaking around and there's the guard who's fallen asleep, and then you can cast that little cantrip on them, and now they won't wake up. They will stay asleep, which is very useful, but it's very, it's very situational. I might do that. All right, I got to bust through these because I got to break out of here because I got an appointment. I got to follow up with my doctor this afternoon, so I got to hit the road shortly. Okay, so we got the cheap shot. I don't know if I like that, but I'm not exactly sure what they're going for. Kind of an extra attack, but they only get it. I feel like it's a little bit clunky. I need to think about that a bit more. Reflex pool, the total is equal to the character level. You could spend a point in order to do one of several actions. Make an opportunity attack, attempt a parry, attempt a riposte. Performing a riposte requires a successful parry. 1 point must be spent for each action. You regain said points after a good night's sleep. See, here they already have kind of 2 separate pools, which to me is at least 1 too many. If I'm going to have a dice pool, I really just want 1. So I would have 1 dice pool that you can do several things with, and not 2, 3, 4, whatever dice pools floating around. Light step, they get +3 to their movement rate. Sixth sense, 1 in 6 DM roll. DM can make this roll before the character encounters something terrifically dangerous, with a result of 1, indicating a general bad feeling. I think I would that's really, to me, is just simpler just to say they have a better chance of surprise, or like an elf's ability to avoid, having a little bit better chance to avoid surprise, I think makes, as opposed to the bad feeling, and it folds into that mechanically. I just might use that instead. Individual initiative, player can roll their initiative separately with a +1 bonus to their roll. I don't know that I would do that either. Maybe they can inspire everyone else to move faster or move a little bit better. Why not just say, hey, allies, whatever group that the dervish is in, they get +1 to initiative. And then we have the warden. Weapon and armor restrictions. Any non-metal weapon is fine, including bows. Assuming that the arrow tip is flint, obsidian, etc. May not wear armor. Hit die as magic user to hit as thief. Saving throw as magic user. Prime requisite is charisma. Wardens grant a +1 to reaction rolls so long as they are present. Their prime requisite is charisma. So okay. I'm not sure why, though. What is the warden? If their primary requisite is charisma, presumably someone's going to get in there with charisma, so they're already going to have some bonus to their reaction rolls, assuming they just didn't roll cruddily across the board. So I'd like to know a little bit of what's the fictional reason for a warden, who I think I get kind of in my mind, I think ranger kind of vibe, but can't tell. You may turn into your hit dice worth of animals on command. For example, if you had 2 hit die, you could turn into a singular 2 hit die animal or 2 single hit die animals. The hit points of multiple beasts is determined by dividing. It just seems too... So this is kind of a druid-ish. Yeah, I don't... turning into multiple animals. I could see if you were doing a swarm kind of thing, where in essence the multiple part is really just a fictional thing. Like, oh, you're a bunch of rats, but you're all kind of bunched together, and so for purposes of damage and everything else, you're one thing, but you're visually you're a bunch of rats. That I could see, but man, having multiple, and what are they going to run away? And then what happens if they run in opposite directions of each other, and then you turn back? I mean, where do you turn back? You turn back at one of them, at the other one, or you get to choose? Is it my choice as the GM? Is it in just somewhere equidistant between the two? Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think I'd want to work on that a little bit. And then you have a mark target. +1 on rolls versus a number of opponents equivalent to your level. But then you gotta, those mark things in 4th edition were okay, because if you're playing on a VTT and you're playing on a battle mat, and you want to use, we used when we were playing 4th edition poker chips, and you could slide poker chips of different colors underneath something. So if you want to slide some poker chips underneath somebody to track that kind of marking type abilities, that's fine. But for something like Theater of the Mind, I think it just becomes a bit of a much to manage. And I think you could easily just do something else. Give them something else to do that they could engineer getting a bonus as opposed to that kind of mark. But I'll give an upvote. It's interesting. And we are there. We are past the top of the hour, folks. Before you leave, if you give a thumbs up to the stream, I'd appreciate it. If you found yourself in here and not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, and go ahead and become a subscriber. Get subscribed, and then you'll find out when all these things are coming. I tend to post in the community tab, and you will get notified, or you can use the bell icon, I think, if you want to get super notified. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, night, when you're watching or listening to this. I'm recording this on a Friday, so have a great weekend, everyone. I got to get out of here and go visit the doctore. Hopefully, and get a clean bill, or at least as clean as I can manage, bill of health. Cheers, everybody. Game on, and I'll talk to you later.